Hey guys, I am back filming my November wrap-up. So this month I read 7 books and there is definitely a mixture of books in here. You'll definitely see all the different genres that I like to read. So let's get into it. I'll be talking through my books in chronological order, so this is the order in which I read them. So, the first book that I read this month was Conversations with Friends. I really like this one. I think I gave it either 3.5 or 4 stars. I've read Normal People and Conversations with Friends from Sally Rooney, and Conversations with Friends is definitely my favorite one. So if you don't know what this is about, it's about a girl named Frances and her best friend Bobby, whom she used to date. And they meet this other couple, Melissa and Nick. And it's basically an exploration into their relationships, all told from Frances's perspective. So from Frances's perspective, you see like relationships change, and I think if you've read Sally Rooney's work before, you know the kind of vibe. It's not super plot based, it's definitely more of a character study. And obviously Frances is young, she's like 20-something woman and she's trying to make it as a writer. So you get to see her experience through all of that. And I did really like this book. It's just with Sally Rooney's style, I think it's difficult to keep my interest as a fantasy reader. I like something quite action-packed. And my favorite types of books are actually ones that have a twist at the end or something that I'm not expecting. And obviously with this kind of more slow-paced slice of life book, I just didn't really, there was nothing that really grabbed my attention, although I did really like it. The next book that I read this month was Brave New World by, who is this by? Aldous Huxley. I should know that, but I didn't. So obviously, classic dystopian. What it's about is this dystopian world, and we follow a cast of characters actually. We follow a few characters who grew up in this world, and one character who hasn't grown up in this dystopian society. And what this society consists of is a very rigid caste system, and it's a society very much based on consumerism and a lot of propaganda. And if you want a deeper look into my thoughts on this book and just more about the plot, I do have a reading vlog that's dedicated to this. So I'll either put it up in the cards or leave a link in the description, so check that out. I gave this book 3.5 stars. One of the main issues that I did have with this book was it keeping my attention, which seems to be a common theme. But basically, this book uses a lot of long stream of consciousness style sentences where it's just a bunch of clauses put together, and I find that kind of style really difficult to read. And add on to that, to kind of, I guess, portray the kind of society that's in here, Huxley uses a lot of clinical language. It's very much like, first this happened and then whatever. Like, it is very clinical, and there's a lot of jargon specific to the world that you need to get used to. And I don't know, I think I'm missing something here because I didn't quite understand how it relates to our world. Although, that might just be me and the fact that I've just finished exams and my brain is fried. So yeah, 3.5. It was pretty good for a classic. Like, it managed to keep my attention, but I just never really found myself reaching for this. The next book that I read this month is Jade Fire Gold. Now, this was a new release this year. I think it got released in October. And this is something that I saw on TikTok once or twice, and I saw some stuff on Instagram, and I really wanted to read it because what this book is about is it's heavily based on Chinese martial arts, like Chinese martial arts shows. And the author herself, I think she grew up in Singapore or something, and she said that she is heavily inspired by like Chinese culture and martial arts, and you could definitely see that come through in the book. So in the book, we follow our two protagonists. One's name is Anne, and she basically doesn't know where she came from. She knows that she was left as a child and that she has this magic that is pretty much forbidden in the country. And if she is found out to have this magic, she's going to be imprisoned and probably put to death. However, events lead to her having to use her magic, and when she is found out, the palace guards actually take her to the imperial palace instead of to the prison. And this is basically Anne trying to figure out what her history is and what's going on with the world. The other perspective that we follow is a character named Altan. What Altan is he used to be well known throughout the kingdom. Everybody knew his real name. Altan is actually a fake name that he came up with. Now he's pretty much on a quest of revenge on the royal family, and he will stop at nothing to get it. But when Altan and Anne meet, obviously things happen, and it's like a spanner in the works. He wanted to get revenge, but now he's not so sure. And I gave this book 3.5 out of 5 stars because whilst I really liked the premise and the story was really good, I just found that character development was really lacking. And even though I do prefer more action in my books, I really do care about character development, and it's just the characters of Anne and Altan, in my opinion, weren't developed enough for me to really care about them. Also, in the beginning, it seemed kind of slow-paced. It was only around page 200 or something, and this is like a 400-page book. So it was only around page 200 when I really started getting into the story. And another thing is, this book would be difficult at points. I don't think it would ruin the experience, but at points there are references to Chinese proverbs and idioms that I myself had to search up to understand fully. So if you were thinking of reading this, that's just one thing to be aware of. There's quite a lot of reference to Chinese culture and Chinese idioms. Other than that, I do recommend that people read this because I think it's a good introduction to the Chinese culture. And obviously, we've got an Asian author, so you know what? It's not a bad book, and I do recommend it if you're looking for a fast, fun read. Now, the next book that I read was BookTok famous, Bookstagram famous, It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Now, just off the bat, I wasn't too sure what to expect. I had heard people say that this was amazing, and I had heard so many good things about it, but I had also heard like not so good things about it, and after reading it, to me, this book is mediocre. So if you don't know what this is about, and you haven't seen it all over BookTok and whatever, this is about a girl named Lily Bloom, and it basically details her current relationship with a man named, what is his name? Ryle. So it details her relationship with a man named Ryle, and Ryle is, in the beginning, he seems like the perfect guy, and she is starting to fall in love with him. As we see her relationship with Ryle progress, there's a parallel storyline kind of told through like diary entries or her letters to Ellen DeGeneres, and that details her relationship with her first love, who's called Atlas. And obviously these two timelines end up converging, and yeah. One thing to be aware before going into this, there's definitely mention of domestic abuse, and honestly, I found this book, like I said before, pretty mediocre. I just didn't really connect with any of the characters. Lily Bloom is definitely a pick-me girl. She's like, oh my god, my last name's Bloom and my first name's Lily and I love gardening. Like, I'm so quirky and like, I hate my name. Like, she's definitely, yeah, not a very likable main character, although you do sympathize with her as you like learn about her story and her life and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend this book. If you're looking for a fun romance and you're into I mean, sometimes it's marketed as second chance, but I don't even think it's that much of a second chance romance. I mean, this was okay. It was pretty mediocre. I think I gave it a 3. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Just because, I mean, reading it was fine. It was fun, but I would never... It's pretty forgettable in my mind. Now, the next book is another TikTok famous book. By the way, for It Ends With Us and this book, I have a reading vlog up. I'll also link that either in the description or I'll put it in the cards. But this book is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Now, with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, this was amazing. I think there's simply no words. I think everybody has to read this book, and whilst in the beginning I was not that interested, the more I read, it's one of those books where you don't think that it will really hook you, and you don't think that it's really interesting or whatever, but once you start reading, you can't stop. It's like reading those gossip columns in magazines or something, except you're hearing it from a character who isn't afraid to tell the truth. Evelyn Hugo is the epitome of someone who's willing to do whatever it takes. Although her motivations change, and in the beginning she's obviously doing it for her own fame, and it changes as she meets various people. The characters in this are amazing. They're so well written. Taylor Jenkins Reid has an amazing talent, because throughout the whole book I was like, oh yeah, these characters are pretty cool, but then I managed to shed tears in the end. If you've read it, you know what part I'm talking about. I shed tears. And actually there are multiple parts, so maybe you don't know. I'm just gonna say Harry Cameron is amazing. I want a friend like him. Yeah, so I didn't even say what this was about. So basically, this book is about, obviously, Hollywood starlet Evelyn Hugo. And Evelyn Hugo has been pretty much off the grid. Well, not off the grid, but she's a very private person. No one in Hollywood has really heard from her in many, many years, and she doesn't share her private life. What she's really known for is having 7 different husbands. So people are always asking, who is Evelyn Hugo's great love? In the beginning, we follow Monique Grant, who is a new writer at this magazine called Vivant. It rhymes with her name. I don't think that's intentional. Anyways, so she gets called into her boss's office, and Evelyn Hugo has specifically asked for her. Now, she's pretty much a nobody. Nobody really knows her name. She had one hit piece that got her hired. So it's shocking that Evelyn Hugo would ask for her specifically. What Evelyn Hugo actually wants is for Monique to write her life story, write a biography. Through these sessions between Evelyn and Monique, we find out pretty much the whole story of Evelyn Hugo's rise to fame, and you find out who her great love is. And, you know, there is mention of domestic violence in this, and sexual assault as well. I thought this was amazing. I mean, as you can see, I've tabbed a few moments. Let's see, one of the opening moments. This is just a quote. I think this is true. Be wary of men with something to prove. Like, come on. That is, like... Anyway, so writing is exquisite. I think everyone should read this. And I gave this book, I think I gave it 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5. The next book is A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. I think this is a children's book, but I'm not too sure. This was just, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars because there was just nothing wrong with it. I loved it. What this book is about is this young boy named Connor, and he's been having nightmares every night. One night, he gets woken up from his nightmare by another monster. And this monster is going to tell him 3 stories. And then at the end, the monster tells Connor that he must tell the monster his own truth. And basically, we follow this story of coming to terms with the truth and acceptance, and as well as grief and loss. And there's just so many things packed into this book and so many nuances It's really beautiful, and it's a pretty short book, but it has a lot packed into it. I just think everybody should read this. I mean, it's beautifully written, and yeah. I also think that you should go into this pretty blind. There's not too much that you need to know about the storyline before going into this book, and I think you should just let the story unfold on its own. I really love Patrick Ness's use of stories within a story to convey the message that he wants to send. So yeah, I recommend this to everyone. 5 out of 5. Now, the last book that I read this month was a manga, and it is My Hero Academia Volume 1. So recently I've gotten into anime and manga, and I started watching My Hero Academia a couple years ago when one of my friends introduced it to me. And you know, I love this boy, he's so cute. If you somehow haven't heard of this extremely popular anime, this manga is about a boy named Izuku Midoriya. I am butchering that pronunciation, do not come for me please. Anyways, this boy, he lives in a world where everybody, well, pretty much everybody has something called a quirk, which is like a superpower. And he was born without one. And this is a story about him gaining powers and working his way to becoming the superhero that he's always wanted to be. And he obviously gets into an academy for heroes. The whole series pretty much details his experience, and this was volume 1. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars because the drawing of women, I just really didn't like it. There's some sexualization in here that I'm not a fan of. But other than that, I love the characters, I love the art, I just really like it. So 4.5 out of 5. If you're into manga, I doubt you haven't read this yet, but if you haven't, give it a go. I do like it. And I will definitely be reading the other volumes. So that brings me to the end of this wrap-up. 7 books this month is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. Let me know what you guys read this month and whether you agreed or disagreed with my opinions. If you disagreed, please tell me what you thought of these books. I'm happy to hear new perspectives all the time. If you did agree, please fan my ego and put it in the comments below. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. I'll talk to you soon. Bye!